actually making me nervous.
Do you not know?
No, I do.
Under the blazing lights of the World Cup final, a woman with bright purple hair stands still, defiant, fearless, unapologetic. As the crowd erupts, Megan Rapinoe raises her arms, chin high, her eyes burning with something far deeper than victory. For her, this moment isn't just about winning a trophy. It's about rewriting what victory means. How did a small-town girl from Redding, California become the face of courage, equality, and rebellion? How did she transform a game into a global movement? Behind the goals, the medals, and the golden smile lies a story of sacrifice, of standing tall when the world told her to kneel, of fighting battles far beyond the soccer field. Her journey is one of glory and controversy, love and loss, triumph and resistance. This is not just the story of a champion. It's the story of a woman who refused to play by the rules, and in doing so, changed them forever. Megan Anna Rapinoe was born in Redding, California in July 1985, a quiet town surrounded by mountains, forests, and the endless California sky. Life there was simple but never easy. Her parents, Jim and Denise, worked tirelessly to provide for their large family of 7 children. Amid the chaos of siblings and school, Megan and her twin sister, Rachel, found something that gave them freedom: a soccer ball. While other kids spent afternoons glued to the TV, the Rapinoe twins chased each other across dusty fields, kicking anything that rolled. Their father, once an athlete himself, encouraged them to play hard but fair, to compete, but never lose their kindness. Yet beneath the laughter, Megan grew up watching her brother Brian fall into addiction and trouble with the law. It would become one of the most painful and defining stories of her youth. A lesson in how easily life can unravel, and how fiercely love must fight to hold it together. From an early age, Megan learned that the world doesn't hand out fairness. You have to demand it. She wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but she was fast, bold, and unafraid to speak her mind. On those Redding fields, she discovered her first taste of rebellion, the belief that rules could be challenged, that limits could be broken. Her childhood was far from glamorous, but it forged something unbreakable: a fighter's spirit, a heart that refused to quit, and a spark of defiance that would one day set the world on fire. When Megan Rapinoe stepped onto the soccer field at the University of Portland, she was no longer just a kid from Redding. She was a storm waiting to be unleashed. Her talent was unmistakable: electric speed, pinpoint accuracy, and a fearless attitude that made her stand out from the first whistle. But for every highlight moment came an equal measure of pain. In 2006, just as her star began to rise, disaster struck. A torn ACL, every athlete's nightmare. The diagnosis was brutal. Her season was over. But for Megan, it wasn't just her knee that broke. It was her identity. She had built her entire sense of self around movement, around being unstoppable. And now she was forced to sit still. Yet where others might have faded, Megan found strength in stillness. She studied the game, visualized every play, and promised herself she'd return stronger. She did, only to tear the same ligament again. 2 devastating injuries in 2 years. Most players would have walked away. She refused. Her resilience caught the attention of coaches and teammates across the nation. When she finally returned to the pitch, she played like someone who had nothing left to lose, and everything to prove. In 2009, her dream came true. She was called up to the U.S. women's national team. It wasn't fame she was chasing. It was freedom. Freedom from pain, from doubt, from silence. That first call-up wasn't just a career milestone. It was a resurrection. The moment Megan Rapinoe stepped out of the shadows and began to write her own legend. By the time the 2011 Women's World Cup began, Megan Rapinoe had transformed from a rising prospect into a force of nature. Her purple-streaked hair, her fiery confidence, and her infectious energy made her impossible to ignore. But it wasn't just her charisma. It was her timing. In the quarterfinal against Brazil, with the clock running down, she sprinted up the left wing and delivered a cross so perfect it felt destined. A pass that Abby Wambach headed into history. That single moment ignited a movement. The world had just met Megan Rapinoe, and she wasn't going anywhere. Over the next few years, she became one of the most recognizable faces in women's soccer. Her skill, creativity, and emotional intensity brought the sport new life. But her power wasn't only in goals and assists. It was in her voice. Megan spoke out when others stayed quiet, about equality, LGBTQ+ rights, and justice both on and off the field. Sponsors and media sometimes hesitated, but the fans listened. She wasn't just playing a game anymore. She was rewriting the rules of what an athlete could stand for. Then came 2015. Under the blazing lights of Canada, she led the U.S. to World Cup glory, and the world took notice. She danced, she celebrated, she lived unapologetically. To some, she was a hero. To others, a rebel. But to everyone, she was unforgettable. Her fame soared beyond sports, magazine covers, interviews, endorsements. She became the bold, bright face of a new era. But behind every smile and victory pose was the same drive that began in Reading: to make the world fairer, freer, and louder. Megan Rapinoe was no longer just a soccer player. She had become a symbol of talent, courage, and the cost of standing out. At the height of her fame, Megan Rapinoe seemed untouchable. A world champion, a cultural icon, a voice for millions. But fame, as she would soon learn, comes with a price. In 2016, before a match with the national team, Megan took a knee during the national anthem, following in the footsteps of NFL player Colin Kaepernick to protest racial injustice. The world froze. For some, it was an act of courage. For others, a betrayal. Overnight, the cheers that had lifted her turned into boos, and headlines branded her unpatriotic. The U.S. Soccer Federation quickly reacted, introducing a policy requiring all players to stand. Sponsors hesitated. Hate messages flooded her social media. Even teammates felt the tension. It wasn't just a stand. It was a storm. And as the equal pay battle erupted, Megan found herself once again at the center of controversy. She demanded what was fair: equal recognition, equal treatment, equal pay. But the backlash was merciless. Critics said she was arrogant. Politicians mocked her. Entire news cycles revolved around her every word. Behind the confident smirk and the bright hair, she began to feel the weight of it all. The loneliness of being right too soon. The exhaustion of fighting battles that never seemed to end. Still, she refused to apologize. Silence, she once said, was never an option. But beneath her defiance, the pressure took its toll. The joy of the game began to fade. The noise, the judgment, the division, it was louder than the crowds ever were. And in that silence, Megan Rapinoe faced the hardest question of her life. Was she still playing to win, or simply to be heard? When the storm finally passed, Megan Rapinoe stood at a crossroads. She could have retreated into the quiet, let the criticism fade and the headlines move on. But that was never who she was. Instead, she chose to rebuild. Not her reputation, her purpose. She stopped chasing approval and started chasing authenticity. She leaned into the chaos, turned pain into energy, and found peace in being unapologetically herself. She trained harder, spoke louder, laughed more. The weight that once felt like a burden became armor. Then came the 2019 Women's World Cup. With the world watching and the pressure at its peak, Megan stepped onto the field, calm, radiant, fierce. Every goal she scored carried more than just points. It carried defiance, pride, and grace. Her arms stretched wide after each strike, her expression fearless. Her message clear: I'm still here. When she led the United States to another World Cup title and claimed both the Golden Boot and the Golden Ball, it was more than victory. It was vindication. Not just for her, but for everyone who had been told they were too bold, too different, too loud. And when she stood before cameras afterward, she didn't talk about herself. She talked about equality, about love, about the power of using your voice even when it shakes. Megan Rapinoe had gone from being an athlete fighting for respect to a symbol of hope, a reminder that true redemption isn't about changing who you are. It's about embracing it completely. By the time the roar of the 2019 World Cup faded, Megan Rapinoe had already become something far greater than a soccer champion. She was a cultural force, a woman who had used the world's biggest stage not only to score goals, but to spark change. Her pink and purple hair became a symbol of rebellion and freedom. Young athletes everywhere, girls, boys, queer, straight, began to see themselves in her defiance, her humor, her honesty. She wasn't asking for permission to exist. She was proving that authenticity could win on the grandest stage. Politicians, journalists, and activists alike took notice. When the U.S. women's team finally reached a landmark settlement for equal pay in 2022, Megan's persistence was at the heart of it. She had helped reshape the conversation about gender, respect, and worth in sports, and beyond. Her influence reached classrooms, boardrooms, and living rooms. Parents told their kids, "Be brave like Rapinoe." Sports leagues around the world began examining how they treated women. Even her critics over time were forced to admit, she didn't just play the game, she changed it. In a world still struggling to define fairness, Megan Rapinoe became a living reminder that equality is not a destination. It's a fight renewed every day. Her legacy isn't written in trophies or medals. It's written in the millions of hearts she gave permission to be bold, to speak, to rise. For all her triumphs and battles, Megan Rapinoe eventually found something she'd been chasing her whole life: peace. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that comes from acceptance. Off the field, she began to live slower, softer. Her love story with basketball legend Sue Bird became a quiet sanctuary amid the noise. Together they built a life defined not by fame, but by laughter, respect, and mutual fire. Two champions who understood what it meant to fight and to rest. Megan often spoke about growing older, about realizing that leadership wasn't just shouting louder, it was listening deeper. She learned that being brave didn't always mean standing in protest. Sometimes it meant sitting still, allowing joy back in. She poured herself into mentorship, using her platform to guide younger athletes and activists. Her focus shifted from winning titles to opening doors. For girls who had never been told they could. For players who once felt unseen. In interviews, her tone softened, but her conviction never did. "It was never about being perfect," she said once. "It was about being honest, even when it cost me." For the first time, Megan Rapinoe wasn't fighting to prove something. She was living it. The fire still burned, but now it warmed instead of scorched. As the sun sets on the field that defined her life, Megan Rapinoe walks slowly across the grass, her boots muddy, her hair bright, her smile calm. The crowd chants her name not just as an athlete, but as a symbol of what courage looks like when the world is watching. For decades, she played the game her way, loud, proud, fearless. She fought battles that most people never see, carried the weight of expectation and controversy, and somehow turned both into art. Megan Rapinoe didn't just win championships, she challenged systems. She didn't just score goals. She gave others the confidence to dream, to speak, to exist fully. Her story isn't perfect, and that's what makes it powerful. Because greatness isn't measured by the trophies you lift. It's measured by the hearts you move. As the final whistle echoes, Megan glances back at the field one last time. For a moment, it's silent. Then she smiles, the kind of smile that knows it was all worth it. This is the story of Megan Rapinoe, the woman who played for something bigger than herself, and in doing so, changed the game forever.